here on a Friday afternoon and not in Washington, D.C. When we are not in session in D.C., I'm home. And home here is, of course, the 3rd District. I'm from Van Meter in Dallas County. You know where the Iowa Veterans Cemetery is, and you know where Van Meter is. And so 16 counties here in the 3rd District. I call them the Sweet 16. It goes from Potawatomi County to Polk County and then down to the Missouri border. Interesting fact about this district is it is the most diverse because you have the most populated county in the state is in this district, Polk County, and then the least populated county in the state is in this district, and that county is Adams, more deer than people. And Senator Grassley's probably hit a few of those here. So the way we do this, we just start out with the Sheriff's way we know and Q&A. Josh, you want to reach into the bucket? Is it your own? Okay. It says, thanks for your dedication speech at the Potawatomi County Freedom Rock. That was in Oakland. I want to propose a set of program changes to reduce poverty by stopping the single mommy syndrome, says Carl. Carl, are you here? Do you want to expound on this and give any thoughts you may have?
I think it's time to recognize that we've lost the war on poverty. What most of the impoverished households hold in common now is a single parent head of household and more than one child, and it's a trap. They cannot get out of poverty until somebody can come in and be the breadwinner in the household. So you trap generations of young children in an unending cycle of poverty, and I think the way out of that is to recognize that most of the programs incentivize having more children in the household. You get more for your food stamps, you get more for your housing voucher, you get more for practically every program. I think it's time to announce well in advance that we're going to limit the number of children that the federal programs will pay for, have more at your own risk, as long as you stay a single parent, unable to work because of keeping your children, you will not get the funds and the extra perks that come along with having more in the family. Phase it in over a decade, and I believe we will win the war on poverty that we have so totally lost thus far.
Thanks, Carl, for your question and your opinions on this and your comments. You know, at the federal level, when we look at issues of poverty and you look at welfare, there can be some certain federal support, but I tell you the solutions are going to be at the state and at the local level, because every community is different. New York is not like Iowa, is not like California, and it's going to be different. I like those 50 laboratories, experimental laboratories out there trying different things. And I want to give more and more of that power back to the states and the localities who know the people best that they work with, their neighbors. The great thing about this country is there's no limit on perhaps what you can do in this country. Some people, though, find themselves in a situation where they are in poverty, they can't get out of it. But we are a nation that also has that security there for those folks who are indigent. They can't take care of themselves. There's some dire situations sometimes. And we're compassionate, loving people. We want to help take care of our neighbors. Part of the question is sometimes, are some of those programs enabling people? Is there more of an incentive to stay in some programs than not? I want to find a way to make, incentivize work and help people have a glide path out of poverty to workfare. But sometimes when that happens, there's a cliff and it's just one or the other. And how do we give people a pathway to workfare and a better life? Maybe they should, if they're getting an education, or they are working, but they still need childcare. They can show that everybody's involved and towing the rope, then I think the glide path is a better way to do it. At the federal level, I think we should take this on again. At one point, we had, the states were doing all this, there were some welfare requirements, I think, such as workfare. I think we should bring those back, but let the states decide how to do those. And right now, we have very low unemployment rate. We have a tax bill that has been passed and signed into law, where there's a lot of incentives out there for work. You've got a lot of companies out there giving bonuses, saying they're investing in their company, creating new jobs. And how do we move people into those jobs?
What about increasing the minimum wage? Because women usually get the minimum wage.
Well, for the minimum wage, I think that should be a state issue. I think that's where it should be. There are times when the federal government has dealt with the minimum wage, but states are leaving the federal government behind, it seems, and moving on forward with that.
Iowa.
In Iowa, they haven't.
We're in
Are
Iowa.
legislators here?
We're in Iowa.
I would make sure that you're talking to your state legislators as well.
Mary Ann, she voted to lower it in 5 counties.
You're seeing a lot of municipalities as well deal with this issue. I think that should be a local issue. At the federal level, though, it's generally been pretty bipartisan, and there's been some tax relief for small businesses because small businesses get the brunt of it the most when you're dealing with the minimum wage at the federal level, or maybe any level.
Welfare now than there used to be?
I don't know what the numbers are welfare overall, because what defines that? Because you look at state numbers, the federal numbers. I know on SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, it's lower than it was a few years ago. Part of that is because of the economy and people moving to work. But we're going to try to stick with the program and stick with the bucket. But, yeah. Residency, please ask me, Lee.
Oh, good.
Happy weekend. Thank you, thank you.
I
hope
fish
you have a
and
happy
shoot.
weekend.
The NRA has become a vehicle to increase gun sales. It's bastardized the Second Amendment by dropping the important words well-regulated. I respect the Second Amendment. A year ago, you rolled back a regulation which made it harder for people with mental illness to purchase a gun. Next, you were going to legalize silencers, but put that aside because of the gun attack on your baseball practice team. You've received $250,000 of NRA money for each year you've been in office. You're against a minimum wage increase federally. Teddy bears have to meet safety requirements. Gun owners should too. Do you have only 2 residences, DC and Van Meter? And do we need to vote you out to get rid of machine guns?
Well, first of all, machine guns are already illegal.
You know what I'm saying.
Well, you said machine guns, so I'm just answering that question.
The guns that have been killing all these kids and
And
people.
so, the beginning of the issue. The issue is serious, as we know, and we're dealing with a society right now where, unfortunately, there's evil and people are doing really evil things.
Evil.
And when you look
evil.
at the issue of safety,
We have
the Second Amendment, what happened in Florida, I think there's not one solution for this.
Right.
First of all, you look at the failure that happened along the way with the background check system. And there's holes there that we need to fill. We need to make sure that the states are working in compliance to make sure that they're reporting what they need to report to the federal. It's a background check system.
But a year ago, you decreased, or you rolled back keeping people with mental illnesses having a gun.
Well, let's talk about what you're talking about right now. So the Social Security Administration decided upon themselves that if people can't financially handle their own affairs, whether you're a veteran or somebody else, that your Second Amendment rights should be taken away. I don't think a bureaucrat, a nameless, faceless bureaucrat, should be in charge of telling anybody that they can't practice their Second Amendment right
That's not true.
or any constitutional right. If that is to happen, it should be adjudicated by the courts. There should be a due process. There should be a hearing. It should go through the courts. It should not be somebody who just says, hey, I don't think you can do your books, and we're going to put you on a list where you can't receive your Second Amendment rights. So that's what that was about. And it was a matter of who should determine that. Should you have a due process through the courts, or just somebody randomly saying you shouldn't be able to have a...
It was working well for years, and you guys rolled it back.
The Second Amendment, it is important to people, and if it should be violated, it should be through the courts and not just somebody randomly deciding for themselves.
It was a random thing, David.
Yeah, it was. In terms of outside groups and their spending of money, you said that the NRA has given me...
$250,000 per year of office.
Okay, keep going.
There's been 10,000 up front, and then the 707 total for campaign ads and things like this.
Yeah. So that $700,000 never came to me, never came to my campaign. What you have is you have outside groups who are practicing their First Amendment rights to advocate for or against candidates. And these outside groups spend money, and I don't coordinate with them. I can't. It's against the law. I don't collaborate with them. I can't. It's against the law. I'm not going to break the law. I will tell you this. I wish and I know a lot of my colleagues, could be able to control their own name and image when it comes to campaigns. So I would like any and all groups to just stay out of my race or any of, and well, I won't speak for anybody else. So they did not give that to me directly. They didn't give it to my campaign. I can't control what they do. And I will let you know this, when it comes to any funds that do come to a campaign, I have 3 rules. Solicit it legally, accept it legally, no quid pro quo.
Extended magazines on this topic, just what's happening right now. Bump stocks, extended magazines, what do you have to say?
I thought what the president did with the directing the Department of Justice to stop the stocks was appropriate and fine, and I have been on record on that.
Extended magazines?
Well,
Sorry.
now that we're on the subject,
I just
why
feel
don't we
like
just
that
dive
didn't
in?
all get addressed.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So I think we need to really take a look at a lot of different things. I've heard good arguments as to why we shouldn't have extended magazines.
Right.
I've heard good arguments as to why they're important. I'm listening to everybody on this. The same with the age issue. So I'm willing to listen to these things, but I don't want to be punishing law-abiding citizens who maybe need to be protective of their family in certain situations. And I think it's important as well that we recognize that this person should have never been able to get a weapon. And when we look at our mental health system and the mentally ill, and I want to make sure people know this, when we say mentally ill, we can't be stigmatizing everybody who may have an issue.
Right.
Whether they have PTSD or severe depression, anxiety, that kind of thing, because not everybody's going to do what this madman did. But this madman should have never been able to get a weapon. The question is, how do you make sure he's plugged into a system where the instant background check system throws a red flag and says stop? I think his rights, gun rights, if they're taken away, should be adjudicated by the courts.
What about high-risk temporary removal of weapons? Situations that the police determine isn't dangerous and they're not going to take it away permanently. They've discussed this,
Well, there's something called gun violence restraining orders. I think that's kind of what we're talking about.
Okay.
And this guy, this Cruz guy, this madman, should there been the ability for a parent or guardian to take him to the courts and say, look at this, he should not be able to have the Second Amendment rights, a weapon. I'd like to try to vindicate this and make sure that that right is taken away and he would be on the instant background check system. But you have to have a pretty high threshold. Otherwise, I think it could be abused, but I think it's worth debating and talking about. And they would also have, ultimately, the ability to petition the government, the courts back to get that Second Amendment right.
Right.
So that's part of the debate. As
What
well,
about locked doors on the schools?
that's where I was going next.
Locked doors on the schools, doors that have bulletproof windows and doors that are bulletproof.
So if a lot of
School in Indiana does that, and they also have,
everybody here wants to make sure that our schools are safe and our kids are safe. We all want that. Question is, how do you do that, and who's in charge of that? I certainly think by now a lot of school folks have determined whether or not, if they haven't had a threat assessment, how soon they can get one. At the federal level, I don't want to mandate that teachers be armed. I don't want to mandate that every school has to have a police officer. But I will tell you this, I would be in favor of federal funding to allow school districts and schools who are cash-strapped, who want to protect their children and teachers, to be able to have a grant to hire a school security officer or a police officer. But for the most part, the determination about how the school and kids and teachers should be protected, that should be at the local level. I would not mandate from the federal government that teachers had to be armed. Nor would I forbid it. That should be at the local level. But I do tell you this, I want teachers to teach. I don't want them necessarily to have to be worried about a weapon or securing a room or that kind of thing. But if the localities would allow that and want to, then I leave it up to them. But I would help with federal funding to help schools secure themselves.
Just get rid of the machine guns. What hunter here uses an assault rifle to hunt?
When you done?
Why are we allowing young people to have assault rifles when it's the number one rifle that assault rifles used in every single one of these school killings? A school, young white male who's disturbed, an assault rifle. Assault rifle, ban them, and we could start, because anybody at their house, by the time they get their assault rifle out of the case, loaded, probably too late anyway, they're for military and they're for killing.
Yeah, they're military.
These are part of the discussions we're having. And I'm open to listening to everything, but I want to make sure that we're not punishing law-abiding citizens. I'm interested in what the president wants to propose, some of my colleagues as well. I'm glad he did what he did with the bump stock. From what I hear, it's not effective anyway, and you certainly don't want something out there on the market to change something from a legal weapon to an illegal weapon.
So if people wanted to talk to you further, if you were moving on, and you're open to listening, how do we do that?
Well, we do it like this.
We don't have enough time, because there's more questions,
Yeah.
and I think people really want to go into this topic.
I do one-on-one meetings in the Council Bluffs office, Preston office, Des Moines office. I do open office hours in each county.
Okay.
So
That
you can
could
look.
be scheduled?
Yeah, absolutely. Go to our website, young.house.gov. And they're good discussions too. I prefer them. I like town halls, because sometimes it's good to dive deeper.
Right, okay.
One more note on that, real quick. I don't have the answer. It's a problem. And eventually, it's going to happen closer to home. What would you think we should do? Because I don't know. I can see both arguments. What would you propose?
Well, I want to fix the National Institute background check system. I want to make sure there are no holes in there. I think that's a good place to start. You look at actually the shooting that was in Texas at the church. The guy who was in the military and domestic abuse charges, he should have been plugged into that system and never gotten that weapon. I want to make sure that our schools are securing themselves. I can't force it. I can make funds available. I want to make sure those who are mentally ill, they don't have access to guns. Now, people talk about that's tough to do because of health, privacy issues, that kind of thing. That's why issues such as the restraining order issue that people are starting to debate is pretty interesting to a lot of us on the left and the right and in the middle. But we need to hammer these issues out.
Can I say one more thing on that?
Oh, yeah, why not?
Well, I'm just saying, I think there's, I'm just listening to the media and reading the paper and now hearing you talk, there is some movement towards some of these common sense issues, like the background check, the bump stock thing. Governor Scott apparently today has gone on record, he wants the age raised to 21 before you buy a weapon.
So states, you bring up something good. States can move and do some of these
Why
things
don't
as
you as
well.
Congress people do it? President Trump can direct the FBI to do his thing, but that's not the same as Congress passing a law and the president signing it. To me, that would go, if the Congress would take those 3 steps, and we're not taking guns away from everybody, it would go a long ways towards healing the division in this country.
I didn't hear your.
What are the 3 steps again?
Ban the bump stocks, improve the background check, and raise the age to 21 to buy a weapon. And to me, that's a great compromise of where we are.
What do you think, Bill, about enhanced funding to allow schools if they needed to secure their schools? Have any better thought of having better
The
security
problem
than
there
our
is the price
kids?
tag is too huge.
Right,
There's how many schools in this
Right.
country? You got one courthouse. I mean, I go down there and go to the courthouse, there's 4 officers in that thing. I don't know what that's costing us, but I mean, you can't do that in a school.
And then
Well,
it's
the
gonna
cost
be
of
the
those lives
shopping
is
mall.
what I'm concerned about right now. A lot of Americans are.
Talk is cheap until you pass the taxes to pay for it. Well, the 3 things I'm
They're tough
suggesting
issues.
wouldn't cost a lot of money. Now, the other question, is it true that if you're on the federal no-fly list, you're not on the list, you can't purchase guns? I mean, that would be one thing that you could
Yeah, it's
well
not the same
live
thing, the terrorist watch list.
Yeah.
And if you find if you're, like, let's say you want to fly and they say, no, you're on the terrorist watch
Uh-huh.
list, Bill. If you feel that you are on there falsely, you should have a
Sure.
quick way to kind of appeal that decision.
But those names aren't on the no weapons list.
It could be in NCIC.
I would think it would be too. They would put all.
But isn't that part of the problem? We don't have one central clearinghouse for these lists. If states have their own and the federal government has their own and there's no coordination.
They're all supposed to get there, and that's why the presidents and members of Congress are talking about really filling the holes in the background check system, making sure all the databases are working together.
You hear what I'm saying? If you as a congressman would lead the charge, get your colleagues to say, let's do something as Congress and the president, and your Republicans are all in control of all 3 things. There's no reason you can't get it done.
Well, let me tell you, a Republican from the Midwest is different than a Republican from New York. Is not everybody's the same.
But I bet all the polls show that you
Same on the
got a
Democrat
majority
side.
of
They're not
people.
all the same either. So.
Nationwide, all the polls show that over 50% want something done, like I just mentioned.
I want to get something done too.
To his state point, though, there are 12 states that don't share even felony convictions with the federal government.
That's wrong too.
Is Diane here? Hey, Diane. Your question is, it appears from numerous reports that Melania Trump's parents have obtained permanent residence in the United States through sponsorship by Melania. This process is called chain migration by the president, who wants to end it. For Melania's parents with residence, he called family reunification, and for other immigrants, considered chain migration. Why doesn't one of the Trump's pillars of immigration reform apply to his in-laws? Not yet. Do you want to comment any further on this, or? Well, I'm not going to speak to the president's and Melania's personal family situation and that, but I would talk to you about, when it comes to immigration and DACA, the Dreamer issue, we're all familiar with. Yeah. Okay. One of the things I was talking about in Congress and was part of the Senate packages we're legalizing permanent status, securing the border, ending the visa lottery, and there's a limit on the chain migration side to limit that really to the nuclear family. And so that's what are some of the proposals in Congress right now. I think it should be limited. I think we should do merit-based, skills-based immigration. The visa lottery issue doesn't make sense to me in this sense where you're just kind of randomly through that they call a lottery for a reason, kind of selecting someone to come in. If you were hiring, if you had a company and wanted to hire an accountant, you wouldn't just reach into a drawer and pull of the resumes you got and pull it out and say, you got it.
What would be
And so-
your definition of merit? Because I think, I don't want to,
Yeah.
focus on
No, that's a good
the
question,
terms
you know,
in
what do you
laws,
have,
but-
some kind
but
of,
he was
some
a
kind
car
of
salesman.
skill.
I think he was a car salesman. Actually, I think they're probably close to retirement, but it's just the point that it was so easy for them to get it evidently, I just do some reading, but.
Okay,
it
I don't
just-
know the background.
No, I just look at some stories, but, I've seen it 3 or 4 places now. And so, and I think, from what I've seen too, I think that term, chain migration, is offensive to some people. And, but, I just think that, that's just something that should be looked at.
What? I certainly don't mean to use it in any offensive way.
Right. I know, I'm not saying you do,
Okay,
but
so that's-
the term that's being used, family reunification would be a better term.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, what about the dreamers? I guess I thought you were going to.
Oh, sure.
I'm sorry.
I interrupted you.
It was,
Sorry, I thought we were still not.
well, her question was just
What
about chain
about-
migration.
What about them?
Okay, so, then I'm not here. So I want to find a way for those who came here as young children, as long as they're law-abiding, don't have felonious records, to be able to stay here in a permanent fashion. But I believe that it needs to be linked with real border security. Now, border security for me may be different than somebody else. For me, I don't need to see a wall built all the way from the Gulf of Mexico to San Diego. But I wouldn't preclude a wall from being built in certain areas if that's where the needs were. I think it's a sector-by-sector way in which you secure the border. In San Diego, you're going to need more fencing and more ground-penetrating radar because people are digging tunnels. You're going to need more Coast Guard money. In Cochise County, Arizona, you're going to need more Border Patrol on horseback. You're going to need drones. In Callan, Texas, you're going to need to fortify some levees along the Rio Grande River, okay? You may need some walls around New Mexico in certain areas. So, but I want to see the border secure, and I think most Americans do as well. The Senate has failed trying to get a deal. The president even went as far as the pathway to citizenship, and I've not embraced that yet. I might. It all depends on what goes along with it, such as real border security, ending the visa lottery, limiting chain migration, family unification, I'm sorry, whatever you want to call it. And so in the House, we're going to try to do something. I don't think you should give up. I don't think the House should give up, or the Senate should give up either. But I don't want a deal for just a deal's sake, okay? I want a real solution to this problem. And I'm willing to give a little bit. So the deadline,
Yeah, what's going to happen?
yeah, I sure don't want to see the deadline move, because if it is, then Congress will relax and say, well, it's not a real priority. I don't like the moving target deadlines. I like to see it stay there. I think it should be a priority, though, and I want to deal with it. I hope most people do. You support the president by withdrawing NAFTA. Trade? Lenny.
Go ahead, just.
Sure. So, I do not support with terminating the NAFTA agreement. I don't mind the president making sure that it's modernized and that it's being enforced. I do think that we need to be exporting, we need markets. Getting rid of NAFTA, I think, would be harmful. 90% of those out there, we need to export to, they're outside our borders. We need to make sure that we can't just sell to ourselves anymore, right? There's a whole world out there. I want to make sure that we find markets. Now, the president doesn't like multilateral agreements, which are agreements between 3 or more countries, I guess. He likes bilateral agreements, one-on-one. Well, I think it's important then to engage, and let's do that. Particularly, the president was not excited about sticking to the Trans-Pacific Partnership under President Obama. He said, I'm not going to do that. Now the president is saying, well, maybe I should relook at that and get into that. We need to make a decision, because right now, China is getting ahead of us with all those countries right now. And we want our goods and we want our values there. And generally, when you have trading partners, you act peacefully with them and you don't go to war with them. And I think that's important. But I want our goods, our services, our values out there. I think scrapping NAFTA would be awful for the United States of America, particularly Iowa. You think you see some mountains of corn out there now. We'd be hoping for a trade agreement with Cuba. And if we're hoping for a trade agreement with Cuba, we're really in trouble if we think that's our salvation. You want to comment?
No, that pretty much answers it. My concern is if the United States comes first, and you know, pretty much answers that.
Diane, we got you again. The Rob Porter scandal. You want to just verbalize it to me?
Sure. No, you can read it.
Okay. The Rob Porter scandal revealed at least 100 White House members do not have security clearances. The White House has tried to blame the FBI. That was proved wrong with Chris Wray's testimony to the Senate Intel Committee. Jared Kushner's daily contact with our top secrets put our nation at risk. Why are Republican members of Congress okay with the breach of security? Are there Republicans who said they're okay with this breach of security?
No,
Because I don't know of any who have, and I'm not.
No,
And I know our committee
I
is
haven't heard
investigating.
anybody say anything about it.
Yeah, well,
That's
Chairman
my
Gowdy
concern.
of the Office of Government Oversight has said we need to get to the bottom of this, what's going on here. I don't think that, our security of our nation is very important, so is that information, obviously. We want to make sure that those who are receiving it have background checks and are adhering to the rules of adhering to classified information. I don't think it's doing this. Diane, if we pick another one of yours, I'm going to set it aside.
All right, that'd be
To
fun.
go to someone else, but just full disclosure, let you know that. And Josh, if you pick your own, I'm very suspicious of you. Is it yours? Okay. Do you support funding to improve our infrastructure? Anybody want to just talk about infrastructure in general if nobody wants to expound on that? If you get around the district like I do, and many of you do because of your jobs, not everything looks like Interstate 80 and Interstate 35, right? You've got some roads and bridges that have some real problems, and we need to make sure that they're safe, they're reliable. We want to make sure our families have safe roads to drive on, and we have commodities that we want to get them to market. We want to make sure they get to market. The president has proposed in his campaign, and then just recently he released some proposals on infrastructure. He put a $1.5 trillion price tag on it. However, it looks like he just wants to leverage just a couple $100 billion from the federal treasury. So the question is, what's the math? What are the numbers and the other makeup between 1.5 trillion and $200 billion? He's talking about public-private partnerships. Creative, what does it mean? I don't know. We need to dig into it further.
Toll bridges, toll highways.
Issues, toll bridges people talk about.
It'll be privatized.
People talk about, he's offered, he wants to raise the gas tax by a quarter. I think that is sinking like a lead balloon right now on Capitol Hill. I don't want to, are there incentives for private companies to do certain things? We talk about broadband technology and the lack of internet here in rural Iowa. We got the best workers out here, best communities, we just need to get them wired up. Businesses will come. Are there incentives there? Then talks about leveraging the relationship between localities and state governments with the federal government. I don't want to be mandating anything upon the state and local governments with what they do with their budgets and what they do with their accounts and their funding. So, the president has offered his budget, his proposals, and we like that because we want to see that blueprint and where the president's coming from. But in Congress, we'll really be the ones who will spearhead that. The Transportation Infrastructure Committee will start that off. I will tell you this, when it comes to the Federal Highway Trust Fund, we do have a gas tax, state, federal. With the way technology is going right now, there's a lot of other vehicles out there that aren't really paying into the trust fund, right? Electronic vehicles, some run on propane, natural gas. How do we make sure that everybody who's on the roads is paying into it? I think you need to pay to play. I don't think anybody should ride for free on this. And I'm hoping that we'll address that in Congress and that the Department of Transportation is taking this seriously too. Because if the continued trend with the technology goes and there's just electric vehicles out there, nothing's going into the trust fund. And then what do our roads look like?
Where does the trust fund money come from?
The federal gas tax, highway trust fund. Yeah. Yeah. Bill, this is you and okay, we covered it. Okay.
Just do it.
Why do you hold these town hall meetings at the most inconvenient times for working people? Why not hold them at times that more people are able to attend? Scott.
Yes.
Scott, where are you?
Right here.
Scott?
Good question.
Anytime I've ever had a town hall, whether it's on a Saturday morning at 9 o'clock or a Thursday at 4 or Saturday or Tuesday AM at 7 a.m. or 4 in the afternoon, somebody's always said, this is so inconvenient for me. And I just can't please everybody at any given time. And so I apologize for that. But I'm glad you're here. And we try to be helpful by Facebook Living this, so while you're at work and maybe you're on a computer or you're driving, you can listen to it. So we really try to be accessible to folks to be able to tune in whatever way that they can on this.
You hope somebody get fired at work.
Thank you for being willing to have them. You should recognize the fact that you do it. Thank you.
I follow up.
I'm sorry. Yeah, did you have a follow-up?
I know a large group of people that wanted to be here and wanted to come here and just can't because they work during the day. They have to work for a living. And it just seems like it's not just you. Joni does the same thing. Schedule these at the most inopportune times for working people. Also, we would love to have you in Council Bluffs, and if you need help setting up an event in Council Bluffs, I would gladly help. We can do it at night so people could come. It would be great.
I'm not opposed to it. I've done it before.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. On February 28th, 2017, a bill co-sponsored by, is Jerry here? Yeah. Okay, this is the one that we just talked about regarding, it says, on February 28th, 2017, a bill co-sponsored by Chuck Grassley was passed revoking Obama-era gun checks for people with mental illness. Did you vote for this bill, and so why? So this is the issue that we were just talking about. I don't want people who are mentally ill to have weapons, and that right should be taken away and adjudicated through the courts. What this was the Social Security Administration were deciding for themselves whether or not people were mentally ill or not, based on whether or not they can handle their finances. And I don't think that it's fair, just because maybe you can't balance a checkbook, balance some kind of, we're running calculator, that the that your constitutional rights should be taken away by an unelected bureaucrat. I think that should be done through the court system. So that's what that was about.
There was more to it than that. I don't remember the whole thing, but there was more involved than just that and the thing. Organizers checkbook. From a personal standpoint, I have a mentally ill son. I have not heard from him in over 4 years. I have no idea where he is. But I know one thing, he should never have a gun. And yet I'm sure if he wanted to get one, he could easily get one. And that's wrong. That is wrong. And it's just morally really wrong.
I'll just take that as a comment. I don't know how to answer that. But the question is, how do you make sure that he doesn't get it?
Exactly.
You don't know where he is, I'm sorry. What is your position on DACA, Don Conrad? I mean, what's,
Kind of covered that a little bit
Yeah.
earlier, but
I'm not comfortable with that date on March 5th being moved. I wanted to see action on this. You know, I've met DACA recipients in our communities, you know, from Council Bluffs to Des Moines, down to Mount Air, over to Bedford, in my own community. A lot of them are through school, college, they have small businesses, some of them, they're working, they're in the military. And they came here through no fault of their own. But I want to make sure that we don't have this problem again, and that there's a real solution, and that's why I think you need to tie it to border security.
So there's no chance you could just pass a clean dream act and then deal with the extended immigration issues
The
at your
Democrats would never
leisure?
allow that
At
to
your
go
leisure.
I
forward.
think you have to marry them together, because right now, I don't think both sides trust one another enough to say, you do this and we'll do this. I think you got to put them together, unfortunately.
I don't think there's a compromise on voting either.
What do you mean by that?
I don't think they should be allowed to vote.
Oh. Yeah, legal status doesn't mean that they're American citizens and would have those rights to vote.
Right.
Yeah, you're exactly correct. We talked about the gun issue. Lenny? Okay. Is it yours, Josh? Please help pass the Butch Lewis Act. I know who this is. Yeah.
Have to do what you can to
Yeah.
keep it so don't get forgotten and important. Help us out.
What act is it?
It's called the Butch Lewis Act, and it regards shoring up pensions.
All the old employer pensions.
Yeah.
People are saying it's a bailout instead of loan, but it's a loan. And you don't want to get it confused.
So I don't know if the Butch Lewis Act should pass on its own. I do know that Nancy, Minority Leader Pelosi and Speaker Ryan, they just formed a new bipartisan committee on pension reform. I tried to get on that committee, but I didn't make it. They only took 4 from each side and 4 from each side in the Senate. But I still want to give my ideas on that, because I know in your situation with the Central States Pension Fund, Teamsters, that you really got a lot of deal when it came to your pension, and it's almost non-existent. And we want to make sure that there's accountability, that doesn't happen again. And I really want to make sure that there's a financial audit as to what happened with your pension.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Welcome.
This is blank. Dealer's choice. Well, I'll take the moment then. I do want to say something about these meetings and how much I appreciate you coming out, even though it may not be the most convenient time sometime. That's why we put this on Facebook and put this out there as well. This is a great country. I hope you would agree with that. Are we perfect? No, we're not. When we talk about issues such as immigration, everybody wants to come here. We are still that bright, shining city on the hill. The only way this works is if you demand accountability from those who represent you. I want you to know that I do this because I want to make sure that when I'm in a hearing or voting, that I know where the district is, the pulse on an issue. And sometimes the district can be very divided on some things as well, because people are very passionate about issues and their principles on them. But I want to make sure that you demand that accountability as well from your other members of Congress and the Senate, your local officials as well. I see there are local officials here today who make themselves very accountable. Mayor, Mary Ann, thank you. And others, Mayor, thank you as well. Because this can only work in that two-way street relationship. And I want you to know that the president is the president. He's not my boss. Speaker Ryan's not my boss, and Mitch McConnell, the Senate's not. Chuck Grassley's not my boss, or Steve King, or Dave Loebsack, or Rod Blum, or Joni Ernst. Well, Joni does live in the district. I'll take that back. She's the 3rd district resident, so I listen to Joni, and all of you as well. And so I just want you to know this can only work as well if you're. Thank you for being civil, because I've been to some of these that have been pretty emotional, and emotions are natural, right? And I love passion, and I want you to be passionate. Thank you for the civil as well. And that there's more that gets done that you don't see in Washington, D.C. in a bipartisan manner. A lot gets done. The majority of what is done in D.C. on the floor, the House and the Senate, is bipartisan. So you don't hear about those good bills like anti-human trafficking or help for veterans or education help, those kind of things, or conservation or agriculture. There are some issues, whether it's immigration, health care, the gun debate we're having, that people can be really steeped in their principles on, and that's okay. But I've always promised not to be toxic with my talk on issues and screaming and yelling, and we hear enough on that from the left and the right. Because if I do that, then I'm not sitting down at the table where the solutions are. And if I'm ostracized, so is this whole district, 700,000 plus people, and I'm not going to do that. Some people say, why do you even do town halls? Is it productive? It is for me, and so I appreciate this. My time is up on that. But I wanted to get that point out. This can only work when we're doing this together. So thank you.
Thank you.
And Dad, thank you for coming. And my sister came today. I don't get to see him enough. Diane.
Oh, no, not him.
Huh?
That was probably a positive.
David, you are the best. No. You're the best at reading questions. Okay, I'll set it aside though. Okay. Easy, because I love you. Oh, yeah.
That's been covered, I saw my name.
Okay. Hey, let's get colluding with CNN right here. Is Jerry here? This is the, yeah, let's do it again. I think you've only got one, right?
Right, I don't know.
Okay, Trump is proposing a $4 trillion plus budget for next year that projects $1 trillion total federal deficit. Your party was concerned about the national debt during the Obama administration. What is the outrage with this budget? Do you want to expand on that, or is that good enough?
Well, I think it's hypocritical that Obama was so criticized for that, and now it's okay to run up the national debt.
Well, I don't think it's okay. And the president's budget doesn't balance. But let me say something about presidents and their budgets. By law, presidents have to offer a budget. Doesn't become law, but they have to offer one up by law. Congress is the body under the Constitution that proposes the spending and sends that on to the president for his signature in appropriations bills. I've always talked about under President Obama, did debt increase while he was president? Yeah, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it was all his fault. I mean, the two parties are
The deficit went down.
two parties are complicit.
The deficit went down. The national debt, that's the overall, but the
Yeah.
national the deficit went down under Obama.
Well, we tended to focus on the debt, and both parties are guilty of this. Yeah.
But I don't see the outrage now with spending the money that's being spent. With the tax bill, what that's costing, I just don't see the outrage that was there before.
So the tax bill was scored as if there would be no economic activity, and if people just put, businesses did nothing with the tax relief. Didn't take into account the economic activity that would be driven from that, the new revenue that would be coming in. For instance, the repatriated money from overseas that would be coming in. I believe that the tax relief bill, it is growing the economy, and it will help with new workers bring in new revenue. But we do need to use that to drive down towards the debt. I believe in a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. I wish, like 49 states out there, by state statute or state constitutional amendment, that we could balance our budget like them. I think that's what we need. We need the constitutional balanced budget, and it would mean some painful cuts in programs. It would.
Well, it could,
And
you could also do it by not giving giveaways to corporations as well.
And I
There's
believe
two
in
sides to that, right?
believe in a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution, and in cases of a national emergency and things like that, I would have a high threshold to vote for new spending. But
You started your answer with, I'm not for that either. So did you not vote for an increase in the debt ceiling?
so we had a not so beautiful bipartisan budget act not too long ago. As you know, we had our sequestration. You've heard that word? Our federal government taught us that new word a few years ago in budgeting sequestration. And we were severely hampering some of parts of our federal government. Particularly, we had soldiers who were not being able to be trained properly as they were going through training. You saw what was going on with the ships out in the Pacific, Southeast Asia, how many in that fleet were crashing, right? They didn't have proper maintenance and operations of a lot of things, from ships to planes. And General Mattis said this is an emergency, and we cannot be a strong military if we don't have a strong soldier and if we can't train them. And so we needed to increase our military, and with that, we increased spending as well. It was a deal of leverage for non-defense spending as well. And with that, there was they hooked things like debt ceiling increase in there, some other things. And it's one of those where sometimes you hold your nose and vote yes, but I think it was the right thing to do to make sure that our country had a strong military and were protecting our troops, training them properly here and overseas. Yeah.
So on the tax credit, the new tax bill with the repatriation of funding, how much of that, do we have any idea how much money's coming in from that?
More than we were expecting early on as well. I can find the numbers and we can tweet that out or post it on Facebook and follow up with any of these other issues as well. But there's a lot of money that's coming back. Now, can we use it in the right way to drive down our debt and deficit?
Isn't there a lot of money coming back from Europe?
Yeah, whether it's Europe, whether it's those countries that were domiciling overseas. And they were domiciling overseas because the corporate tax rate was one of the highest in the industrialized world. And it made sense for them to go overseas and set up shop. And now that they're home, they've come back with a deal to bring that money back at a rate agreeable with the federal government. So, very helpful. Josh, you're on. Look at you. Okay. You want to do it, or can I go to?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Jerry.
I did already.
Just go through do them all.
Oh my God,
This is from Matt. What is the plan to address gun violence? Something needs to be done eventually. It will happen here. Thanks. Which Matt was this? Okay, he left. The plan is to deal with this multi-level strategy. That is making sure schools are secure. I want the locals empowered to do that. I don't want to force that from the federal government, but I'll make funds. I'll try to make funds available. That's where I would come down. Plug in the holes when it comes to making sure the NICS system, the check system, works effectively, and the states have to be helpful with that. Localities. It's pretty horrific what happened. We all realize that. I don't want it ever to happen again. Nobody does. If I had a magic wand and we just get rid of this problem, we would do it. The mental health system I'm very concerned about, making sure that, one, we want to take care of those who have certain conditions and illnesses, because they're our fellow humans and we want to take care of them. And two, I want to make sure that those who can't control themselves don't have access to weapons. We don't see this ever again in the paper or on TV. I know that when you say thoughts and prayers, some people say, what does that do? For me, praying is important because it helps me get through some pretty tough times. And when I offer prayers up for this, these tragedies, I'm offering prayers to the families to get through these awful situations. And I do pray that this doesn't happen again. And as a person of faith, and I don't know where you are with your faith, but it's okay to pray. But you have to put that faith into action as well. Thank you very much, and I'm getting the hook over here. Thank you for allowing us to do this.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Well, I'm ready to go.